Morning, everybody. Bobby Umar here with Adam Grieg, and welcome to the Power Connection broadcast. Morning, Adam. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Bobby. Really excited to be here.
Oh, wait, I'm having trouble hearing you. Hold on.
Oh,
Let's do a sound check. Go ahead and talk.
can you hear me better?
I can hear you now. Hopefully, so I'm going to do a sound check, make sure people can hear you. Hold on. Morning, everybody. Sorry, just do a sound check. Using my phone here. Check. Broadcast. Morning, Adam. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Bobby. Really excited to be here.
Oh, wait, I'm having trouble hearing you. Hold on. Okay. Let's do a sound check. Hold on a second. Okay.
Can you hear me better?
I can hear you now. Hopefully. Okay, great. Looks like sound is good. If you guys can hear us, great. Thank you so much. Just doing a quick sound check. Thanks for joining us today for the Power Connection broadcast. I'm usually on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Friday mornings around 8:45 a.m. Looks like people are joining here. And if you are joining us, a few things as you join the conversation. First off, let us know where you're from. Are you listening in from North America, South America, Africa, Asia, Europe, Australia? Let us know. We want people to engage with us, so ask questions. Already people are here. Rachel says good morning. Felicia, good morning. Muzaffar from Pakistan. Brenda, good morning from Detroit. They can hear us. That's fantastic. That's all we need to know.
All you need in this crisis.
Yeah, exactly. So, and dealing with tech crisis is nothing now compared to the big crisis we're dealing with. And that's exactly that. Yeah, exactly. And that's a topic for us today, which is, dealing, the business survival checklist, dealing with the COVID-19 crisis, particularly this. And so, one of the things about Adam is that he and I are going to go through some really important things you need to know about dealing with this crisis. So if you are joining us again, another big part of our program is we want you to engage us. So ask questions about your business, your profession, your career, what's going on with you, how are you dealing with this stuff. We want to hear from you and start sharing those stories. If you like what you're hearing, you can like, clap, heart, light bulbs, smiley face. You can tag people during the conversation. You can share your own pages and talk about it. But again, we're trying to really invite people to join this conversation because we think it's a very, very important one. So, just to get going, let's just start with a bit about who you are, Adam. Why don't you tell people a bit more about just you, your story, and then we'll dive into the topic itself.
For sure, thanks. So just to give a bit of a background, my name is Adam Grieg. I lead new business for People Corporation on behalf of our partner firms. Basically what we are a total rewards solutions provider. We are Canada's largest consulting firm, third-party administrator, and managing general agent. And basically, since Morneau Chappelle sold off to Hub, we're effectively one of the last few Canadian-only independent firms to work with Canadian businesses. And we feel it's especially important during this time that we get out here and we start to work with the Canadian businesses that are not only our own clients, because we have about 11,000 clients across Canada, and we're about 1,200 employees, but really just to kind of help, offer that help, be there for the small, medium, and large businesses, and make sure that that information that's most important is getting out there, and that they're being equipped with, for lack of a better term, that checklist that they need to know as it stands today, so to speak.
And so we've been I've been doing interviews with people, and what's interesting is that all we're talking about is COVID, right? And how everyone's talking about it. It is the water cooler talk, although it's a cooler at home in the kitchen, virtually. It's just fascinating. How is this? How's it going for you personally? I mean, like, how are you handling it personally?
Oh, I mean, personally, it's I've yet to meet a person who hasn't been personally impacted by COVID-19 or the stay-at-home isolation. I mean, it's almost as if you can throw a stick down the street and you can find a neighbor in your community who's been impacted one way or another, if not in their business, their work life, their personal life. I myself was set to get married in Italy in May. Wow. So my fiance and I were met with a much different reality than the one we set out to expect a year ago at this time. But like we said, ours is a story similar to everyone else, and that's really kind of one of those driving forces on why moments like this, opportunities to kind of help Canadians across the board, small, medium, large, independent, entrepreneurial, is most important, because we're all in this one way or another together, and we're all just getting a different slice of that same cake.
Yeah, and then the one big point I think is really important is that businesses, there's business and there's personal, and they intersect, right? So our lives are personal,
Yeah.
and they interact with our business lives as well. So I think people need to understand that kind of thing. And people again are commenting. Felicia says that one of her things I found saying one line of encouragement to our fellow doctors and nurses has been a source of strength for her, which is great. Homie says good morning to everyone joining in again. Ask your questions and let's talk about how businesses are dealing with COVID-19. Another personal question, if you don't mind, before we dive into it, which is,
Yeah.
we talk about the wedding and stuff. We had a big event. Weddings are very personal. So, like, how do you make that tough call? Like, and there's gonna be like anger, denial, and then acceptance. And so, can you explain how that works? I'm just curious.
Well, I mean, I'm very fortunate. My wife, I'm cutting out the middleman. I am an intermediary, and I cut out middlemen, so it's a juxtaposition in its life itself. But my fiance works for the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario, so we've always been very fortunate in that they've been very much on that bleeding edge of being aware of this and the shortages and the risk it presents to nurses in Ontario. So we've been having our conversations, I guess, in a more accelerated rate than maybe what other couples had. Right. So we were fortunate to go through those 5 stages of grief much sooner than everyone else. And I was in San Francisco a few weeks ago, and things had started to get rocky. And I actually returned a few days just before the Prime Minister had said, everyone out of country, come home. You're isolating for 14 days. So I'd come home on the Saturday before that. And that was when we decided that, family, friends, the risk, like there's just too many unknowns to ask that of people. And the at-risk population, everyone has a grandmother, a nona, a papa, and those are the most at risk. And if you don't even know you're symptomatic, then it became a much more black and white conversation from our eyes once we really kind of sat down and chewed the meat on the bone, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think that a lot of people are coming to grips with some of the tough challenges and decisions they have to make. So let's segue into the topic. And before we get it, we prepared some specific questions, but I kind of want to get a general take. We talk about the topic is the business survival checklist, right? And let's talk about that in terms of why it's important for businesses. Let's talk about the checklist, the survival checklist, and why that's important.
Sure. So it's the reason I like to think of things as checklists is checklists take into account not just current state but future state, and we find that that's the most important thing to really have conversations with your clients, is that or anyone on this topic, is not just appreciating where today is, but also trying to position yourself and appreciate where tomorrow will be. I mean, every day at 11 o'clock we get a new kind of set of news briefings from the provincial and federal governments, and that gives us kind of an appreciation of that political climate. I mean, now businesses are looking at relief for wage of 75% versus a few weeks ago 10%, and had they known that was the end state or the end result of what that initiative would have been, would you have laid off your workforce? And that's kind of the logic of why a checklist is kind of a great way to approach this, because not only is it I need to make sure I have my current needs addressed, but I'm also positioning and considering future needs, like how is my workforce going to return when this is all over? Like, that's a conversation that isn't really happening yet, but I would predict that it is about to happen relatively soon, if not very soon.
Right. And let's start off with a question for the audience that's watching. The big question I'm going to ask you right now, and you share in the comments below. What are the biggest challenges you're facing as a business? So whether you run a business or whether you're part of a business, what do you think are like the top 1, 2, or 3 challenges that your business is facing during this time? Just comment it below. Let us know what it is, and we'll try to read off some of the comments as we go through it. And just engage us, let us know, and again, tag people to join the conversation. I'll start a question for you, Adam, which is you mentioned the Prime Minister, federal government. So in all countries, I mean, we're in Canada, and the Prime Minister is speaking every day. The Premier and mayors are speaking every day about what's going on, and they're coming up with ideas and solutions and new things and new ways to support us. And it's a lot. It's overwhelming, actually.
Yeah.
It's actually quite interesting. But the question for you is really, how do businesses tackle the challenges presented by a dynamic government mandate for Canada to self-isolate And then for non-essential business to close the doors, because that's like, whoa, that's a whopper. Like, whoa, like close
Yeah.
everything, stay at home. I mean, this is unprecedented. I've never seen anything in my entire lifetime. So, how do businesses tackle these challenges?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, like how do you define non-essential? That was nomenclature that a lot of companies never really brought into their operating guidelines or their standard business practice. They had to not only bring themselves up to speed with language that wasn't really in their regular use, and then relate that as to, can I keep people on payroll? And the speed at which information traveled in that moment in time was so much more than any other time we really had. Like you said, like this is new. This is no one I know or anyone before World War II really had to deal with anything to this effect. And even then it was small cases where it was measles, mumps, and regionally based quarantines, not a whole country being locked down. So this is really a good moment for you to take inventory, for lack of a better term, of all the various partners you have. I mean, every business is going to have vendor relations and supplier relations and some sort of broker or intermediary of some sorts. My industry being the prime example. We are a broker, a consultant of total rewards solutions. So if I were talking to my clients or if I'm talking to potential clients, it's conversations, well, what are your current vendors and suppliers doing for you? Because I would expect that they would be keeping me informed as it relates to their business or the services they're rendering on me. And that would be my first starting point is what is your current relationship with all those partners and all those vendors? And what are they giving to you, especially in this time and all other times? And really, if you're looking at controlling the bottom dollar and the bottom line, then it's worth your time. It behooves you to also go into those relationships and see the value you're getting for each dollar that your organization is spending, because now it's more important than ever, right?
And I think you make a really good point that relationships are going to be critical for this transition. I mean, we all have to look at which relations we have that are really strong and what can we do to explore, particularly the key ones. We're going to look at what are the close relationships we have and how are we navigating managing those relationships. So, yeah, I think every business out there needs to really reach out to people. And I know a lot of people are annoyed with the emails of every business sending an email to their customers, right? But at the same time, the ones who do it first, or the ones who write a thoughtful piece, I think they're the ones that are making a big difference. I think I can speak for my own self. I run a startup called DYP, Discovery Personal Brand, and we actually haven't sent an email to our list, mostly because there was a wait and see approach. We didn't know what was going on, and also there was a lot of feedback saying, "Oh, if I get another COVID-19 email, I'm gonna freak out. I'm gonna unsubscribe." But one of the things I've thought about is, as we're drafting something, is just coming something that's different. Some people share great resources, other people just say, "Here's what's happening to our business." I think when I send something, I'm going to tell a personal story. Say, listen, this is something that affects all of us, and it's gonna. I think personal stories can, personal stories are a way to really make the relationship more unique and stand out. So, what's your take on that, by the way, in terms of informing all your customers? I mean, is there a strategy around that, or what do you think?
I mean, I guess you could say it is organizationally specific. That the nature of your business would kind of dictate. Like, obviously, if you're buying paper from Staples and Office Depot, you wouldn't expect Staples to give you a call and say, how's your mom and how are your kids? But in other side of that very same coin, in that service industry where there is that component, I would expect, and that's what we expect of our reps, is that we're reaching out to our clients, not just in times of need, but at all times. But in these moments, just having those touch points to say, hey, we have a wealth. Obviously, PeopleCore has their own database of information that we find is most useful for our clients, and we have that housed on our People Corporation website, and it's the COVID-19, much like every other corporation is now a COVID-19 ending to their website. But it's also to maintain that touch point, to regularly check in and make sure that even if there's no need of you to deliver on a service or do anything to that effect, it's that you're making sure that they, as a person, are having their needs met. And if they need someone just to speak to you and share their thoughts or just vent for a second, that you're there and you're delivering on more than just that business need, that relationship that you have that started it all. And like you said, it's that personal connection, that relationship, that engagement will see you, your employees, and your organization through this tough time. And to be honest, it may be something that positions you to be successful, because a lot of economists are saying that come 12 to 18 months from now, when things start to pick back up, there will be an increase in demand for new hires and new talent, and it would only benefit you to have a better network for that point when your company's ready to strike and succeed than to sit idly by and wait for anything else to happen to you.
Mm-hmm. And while we're talking about this, tell us a bit more about the company you work for, and also what are they doing specifically to deal with the self-isolation and dealing with the business climate.
So People Corporation has been very great about accelerating. Before this, we were, I would say, a fair 60-40, if not 50-50 in office versus remote or somewhat remote workforce. By nature, consultancy, you have offices in certain areas because you have a regional person usually or something to that capacity. And then you have the back end office people who are helping with the administrative. We are third-party administrator as well. So we do have a significant proportion of administrative staff that help our clients administer their group benefits or group pension plans. But effectively so it's funny because I came home from San Francisco from doing a course through the International Foundation of Employee Benefits Plan. And by that Monday morning, our entire workforce had effectively been mobilized to work from home. So it was amazing to see kind of the company react and position us to not only bring everyone to an equal playing field of being able to work remotely, but also to position us to kind of deliver on our clients' needs in a very short order, because for us, we are an essential service. Insurance, group benefits, now more than ever, is an essential service. People with out-of-country claims, people travel insurance, these are the times where a broker, a consultant, and the carrier relationship are of utmost importance. But it was also a great opportunity because our CEO effectively gave us a challenge. He said, "This is your opportunity to prove that this type of workforce, this type of operating system or model can be successful. If we're more productive or as productive, then it gives our organization an opportunity to really rethink." It's a litmus paper test, for lack of a better term. Mm-hmm. We can now rethink our previous model and say, is it now an opportunity to position ourselves for the next 20, 50 years when we didn't think we had to do that today?
Yeah, I think about that all the time because, as a professional speaker, my bread and butter is going to events and conferences and companies and delivering training and speaking in keynotes, and so that's completely been co-opted. And so I have to look at, so how do I create a business for myself that is, COVID-19 proof, right? Or I need to be able to have stuff that I'm doing to make money and generate revenue that doesn't rely on events, which is for me a total paradigm shift. But I have to deal with that. So it's interesting. I'm talking, everyone, for Power Connection Broadcast, I'm talking to Adam Grieg from People Corporation. We're talking about the business survival checklist for COVID-19 and how to deal with this, and he's sharing some great tips on how to do that. People are joining in. Patty Lou joining in from, I don't even know, the shores of Lake Wiggamagog or something. Wiggamog. And she's here. Patty Lou says, great point on relationships. Nicole says, these world events were meant to wake us up to plan for such mass events to occur in the future, like a business without a plan. Globally unprepared, yet we have casually discussed this for decades. It's really interesting. Nicole also says, sending out a touch post is great without a busy post of everything else. And then Nico says, I had the same experience, Bobby. Lost 25K so far in revenue for events. Yeah, I don't even want to tell you how much I've lost. So, but I'm working on other things, and he's from Mexico. So we're all doing the best we can. So, and kudos to the governments. In Canada, the government's doing some stuff to help small businesses, and they have some great plans in place, which I think is really, really helpful to people who are employees or working or companies. I think they've done a pretty good job. And what's interesting is they're changing every day, something new or an evolution or an adjustment.
Every day.
It's unbelievable. I can't keep up with it, but it's so, and the more that comes wow, okay, it's just, because in the beginning it was we're way back in the day, $1 billion, then 12 billion, then 30 billion, then 90 billion. And now this, and it's just adding up. And now stop talking about the numbers because it's just a massive scale.
Yeah, it's just gonna cause a panic amongst the market. But on the note of kudos, also kudos to the nurses, the frontline
Oh
workers,
yeah,
the delivery drivers, the grocery people. I mean, like utmost respect to those people working still and helping us kind of maintain somewhat of a regular life. Because
yeah.
especially the nurses in the healthcare community, you're putting your lives online and the lives of your family. And like first and foremost, my heart goes out to you. And every person should take an opportunity in the day to thank and extend their courtesy to those people still helping us every day.
You know what's really amazing is just the other day, though, it was hot, so my windows were open. And at 7 p.m., no, it was hot in the apartment. So it was at 7 p.m., my windows were open, and I heard the people clapping, yeah, at 7 p.m.
Oh, yeah?
Because I'm near St. Mike's Hospital. So I could hear all the people clapping for the healthcare workers, which is amazing. They do that when they change shifts. That is so incredible. And at the same time, my sister-in-law is a respiratory therapist, so she has been giving us updates all the time about what's going on, and so our family's on top of that. So I think that's really important. But thanks for bringing that up. Let's move on to businesses. So now let's start with the first thing. Everyone who's on the call, type below. Let us know what is your business. So share your website, share your business. What is it you do? If you work for a big company, then let us know what your company does. But yeah, share us below. Let's share your company. I'd love to know. It's free self-promotion right on this post. To my 35,000 followers. Like let's share the love, man. Let's help your business. So share your links below about what it is. But let's talk about the business. So I'm a business. What are my choices? What are some of the options available to business in order to stay afloat, retain as much of their workforce and their customers?
Well, I mean, it's a great conversation, and one that is like multifaceted, and it's really a platform for further discussion because you really have to think of it in a number of different components. But one that we're finding most important right now is communication. Organizations who have really put communication or any sort of platforms to have that engagement amongst your workforce is being put on the back burner more often than not. And now more than ever, it's important because how else are you engaging that workforce who has to produce in a completely different environment than what it was 3 weeks ago? And then also you kind of add in the layer of what we mentioned earlier with the changing dynamic of subsidization from the government. Employers are kind of making decisions and then having to make decisions in arrears, which circles right back to that communication piece. But from our scope of practice, the first thing we always talk to our clients is layoffs, terminations, rehiring previously terminated employees is not something that's just become new because of COVID-19, and they should find that some sort of security in that sentence, because your contract is the best place to go in terms of understanding what you have for the level of coverage. And going back to another topic, your broker, your relationship, your vendor, the carrier that you have chosen, these are all those people that you should be reaching out to and engaging and asking, how does it relate to my plan and my plan specifically? But it's not uncommon for group benefits contracts to have provisions that say you can lay off a portion or your workforce for a period of time and continue benefits. And that really gives you the opportunity to relieve yourself of the payroll, the salary component of your payroll overhead as a business, but lower it down to just the group benefit premiums, perhaps. And that way you can provide your employees with that security, the continuity of care, for lack of a better word, during this tough time, driving home that value from that employee to the employer, maintaining, fostering a healthy psychological contract between the two of you in a relationship, and guaranteeing that you have a skilled labor returning to you in 4 weeks. I mean, it's been extended to April 30th, and it all kind of boils back down to engagement, communication. Like now more than ever, those are things that I would reinforce as being key importance, because group benefits, group retirement have essentially become table stakes, for lack of a better word. Most organizations are providing these to attract talent or to do certain things to compete with their competitors and be market competitive. But if you take it one step further and you find the right partners, the right vendors for all the various products and services that you need in order to operate, then you can set yourself up organizationally one step further than your competitors. And you're in a field where people aren't having these conversations, to be honest. And it's a conversation that we should really have now and not 4 weeks from now, when we're looking at a workforce that's now double-digit unemployment, and you're not going to be rehiring for 12 months. And when 12 months becomes real to us, we'll have a lack of talent for the workforce.
Wow. a lot of issues to consider. And one thing,
for sure.
And sorry, just to clarify something, you said that you mentioned April 30th. What was that again? April 30th?
Oh, well, it's when they've extended, at least in Ontario, when they've extended to schools, the kids staying out of schools.
Right. Yes. Yeah,
so it's a pretty good understanding that if the kids are staying out of school to April 30th, then, I mean, businesses will typically follow, I would argue. And if not, then I would hope to hear something soon, because it's obviously going to put a lot of parents in an uncomfortable gray zone, right? And that's kind of back to that communication piece. If you're engaging them, you're giving them the updates from an employer standpoint, you're giving them one layer of security that they didn't have yesterday.
Yeah, and I can tell you guys that as a parent of kids who are in grade 4 and grade 6, where the kids are homeschooling back there, and it's challenging to work while they're doing it, but I anticipate even longer. So they took 2 weeks extra, and then they took a month extra. I anticipate going even longer, but I think they're trying to figure out what to do in terms of planning and online learning, things like that. So I think that's really, really important. David Kincaid, hey, one of my previous interviewees, he says engagement and communication are the bridge to keeping employees around 1 to 2 months from now. So totally agree. So that's great. Appreciate 100%. That. And Nicole says, we have virtual professional office space, been working virtually in almost 3 years. Love it. Oh, well, yeah, some people are actually loving the remote stuff, which is actually kind of interesting. So it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic shifts back to when we actually do get back together. Do you anticipate people and companies, maybe increasing the number of their workforce that is working remotely?
Well, it's obviously certain, we were seeing it now, right? Certain sectors, the tech, Amazons, those providers, the internet service providers are growing, and they're growing in not only employee base, but also in a number of other metrics. And the employee base growth is interesting. I mean, Amazon said that they needed to hire, I think it was 100,000 new employees to meet the demand of what they're being met with. And if you look at all the Zooms and the social media platforms, I would argue that they're all facing a similar burden, where they need to grow in various numbers of capacities, and that has a trickle-down effect in terms of other industries. If Zoom buys more server farms, then a new factory needs to be built, or a new warehouse needs to be built, machines, and then produces more jobs down the economy train. So it's interesting to see, because what I really don't think is being talked about is what's happening to your workforce now as they're being offered jobs somewhere else. The people with very transferable skills, specifically those white collar jobs, I would say are more at risk. The sedentary ones, where you could be a bank teller at TD and transfer those skills to Scotiabank with relative ease. You're just really going from company A to company B, but as a bank teller, your skills are relatively transferable. So it's definitely interesting to see, and the points that have been made by you and I, and in the call by Mr. Kincaid, it's a great thing to call out, because an engaged workforce is one that stays with you, because engagement, value, that relationship is strong, it's solid. There often is the case that people don't want to leave an employer if they have more threads between you. But if there are no threads to tie, they may leave, and you may be stuck in a very unadvantageous place when this all comes back to normal.
Appreciate that. And again, we're talking with Adam Grieg about the business survival checklist during COVID-19, and she's sharing some great insights from his own work. And as people are commenting, which is great, and some questions. People are asking questions too about what they should do, so we'll get to that. A couple things. Nicole says, "Welcome to multitasking, mandatory homeschool." Yeah, I'm struggling, so that's what. And then Nicole also says, as a former respiratory therapist, just like my sister-in-law, and a trauma nurse, the support means so much to motivate those in the front line. Yeah, like the clapping and the cheering, the kudos, the kind words. Everybody should be doing that. Gratitude all the time. I think that's great.
Tip your Uber driver.
Yeah, exactly. And everybody is sharing their businesses and what they're doing. That's great. I appreciate that. Definitely keep sharing. David has a question. So David says, how transparent should the communication be? Too much could be a problem? What do you think about that?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, you're seeing it now. If you really want a true comparison, I would argue, look at North American politics right now. You have what we're seeing south of the border with the daily press briefings versus what you're seeing north of the border.
Right.
And that would be your argument in terms of how transparent do I go? Well, there is a point where you're giving information that may not be useful. I mean, if you're just finding it out now, the first question I always ask everyone, is this going to change by tomorrow? Because you're not going to really get a chance to communicate. It takes time for you to have these communications, for one. So if it is going to change by tomorrow, then maybe it's something that you don't need to communicate now, or you need to do it in a different way that's not so transparent or not so specific. I mean, a Twitter feed versus an email is a great example, but in the States, you're getting, I would say, much more hysteria and panic because of the volume of information that's being shared. And I would say transparency is a great way to describe it, because it's not being filtered. He's just being completely upfront with everything he hears, or that's at least the way it comes off, versus what you're seeing here in Ontario, at least with Doug Ford, where even even previously his competitors, his biggest critics are praising how he's handling it, and they're making sure that actual factual information, correct information is being sent out, and that when we are being advised of things, you're being advised of things that you can really turn on and depend on. And that's what I would say is, if you're communicating to your workforce, is this something that these employees are going to benefit from, that they're going to be able to implement into either their working life or their personal life, and that puts them in a better place than they were today? If so, then I would say that that's a fair measure to use. And then always consider your industry. If you are in finance versus retail, the nature of your communication has to be appropriate for that workforce.
Yeah, and the political thing versus the business thing is a little bit different. I mean, there are similarities. The big similarity is that I think politically and business-wise, we need to reassure people that we're doing the best we can and on the case and understanding things. I think that's where you want to reassure your citizens, you want to reassure your customers. You know, like I think again, the Prime Minister Trudeau in Canada, Rob Ford and the mayor, all the different political stripes, but they've all done, I think, a pretty good job of keeping it somber, keeping it factual, relying on their scientists and business experts to help us get through, which I think is great.
I agree.
One tip I will give is, if you're going to send the communication out, one way is, you don't have to give out so much information. You can actually start a conversation. Say, listen, if anyone wants to talk about this, I'm making myself accessible on Twitter, or you can email us here. We will be responsive. I'm doing a live Q&A session at this juncture. And what you do is, you don't tell them everything at once, because things are changing. Then you also invite them to message you back or be part of this, this engagement, which I think is, again, good for the relationship.
100%. And it's a great point to really kind of pivot on, because, for instance, when we look at our clients and the relationships we have with our clients, we're also an administrator, which means we have a platform that a lot of our clients use. So we have industry leading HRIS platforms, but a real advantageous piece of it is it gives you a communication platform. For instance, one of our products, Jungo HR, it allows you to have essentially an intranet, for lack of a better word, where otherwise organizations would have to pursue that mechanism by other means. This is a value add that's kind of built in, and we're able to kind of look at clients and say, further to your point, what type of communication is this the best way? Is it the best way just to post a link to the government of Canada's employee or Canadians relief page and have that as the front page every time they sign in to update the hours they did today or whatever it may be? But it's definitely a great point, because it is how you do it, why you're doing it, and to whom you're doing it, that are the most important questions to really ask when it comes to transparency.
And David Kincaid adds, agreed. If you can ask, what does it or could it mean to me, and you get a shrug, then keep it to yourself, right? So that's a great question. So let's transition into employees. So what can I do when I have to lay off my employees? What options do I have as a business to lessen my business overhead expenses while also supporting employees during this time of crisis? I think that's a big one that a lot of employers are trying to figure out.
Huge. Well, I mean, and I think we've kind of touched on it or circled it in a number of different ways, that engagement, that communication is key. Just because they're not in the office doesn't mean that you don't have to or you shouldn't maintain that relationship. Right. I mean, you as an employer represent a number of things. You're that security. You think of the Canadian workforce. We have new immigrants from people who've been here for multiple generations, and the multitude of barriers and possible scares that they may be experiencing are almost endless if you really think about it. So maintaining that offering, like you said before, saying, hey, anyone who needs to reach out, I'm here to help. I am keeping an eye on it as the business owner and the employer. And if you ever want to talk, if you're ever concerned about you or your job, I'm here. And that kind of becomes ever more important if you are, in fact, having to lay off your workforce, because you will want that workforce to come back. I mean, I don't know of a single business owner who's expecting to shut doors. That most are maintaining a more optimistic outlook on their business, especially in light of what the government has been saying. But by having that communication, by talking to them, by engaging with them, you're setting yourself up for success. I mean, a big thing to call out is a predominant proportion of the workforce is going to retire by the end of this decade, or was set to retire before the stock market took a plunge of upwards of 30%. So now the conversation of, you have a whole subset of your population who had a psychological contract with you that their retirement would come to pass sometime between now and the end of this decade. And now that may not be a reality that they can achieve. And it's ever more important that you're reaching out to all of your employees, or at least extending that offer and engaging them and helping them, because it's not only important to do that as a business owner, it's important to do that as a Canadian in your community. First and foremost, now is the time that we come together and we, as a country, move forward, and as a community we move forward, and you extend that hand at a social distance, but you extend that hand nonetheless to your neighbor.
And unrelated to that, I mean, so how do these businesses, maintain and retain employee engagement within their organizations, and what are some of the things that they're struggling with?
So it's obviously, if you've laid off your workforce, that relationship could be severed, right? That communication, that mechanism. So for those, finding a way to start that back up. Now, it's another conversation that's happening parallel to this. I would argue among many companies is, I just laid off my workforce, and now the government's subsidizing 75% of wages up to about $60,000 a year, or I think it's $894 a week. If you meet certain guidelines. I think one of the guidelines was that your business lost a revenue of about 30%. And I would imagine there's other ones, and it's on the Government of Canada website. So I would strongly recommend every Canadian business owner go to that website, understand and appreciate every day what's being done for you and how that relates to you and your workforce, because there is an argument now to say where you could return your workforce to some degree of employment and work with your carrier and your various partners in order to find a common agreement, or a common mutually beneficial arrangement. So then that way you can keep your employees, keep them on payroll to some extent, have the benefits there, and now you have a workforce returning. But otherwise, you really need to start looking at those social media platforms. Would be the conversations we're really having. Twitter, LinkedIn, these are things that had once been almost recreational, but now can be very occupationally beneficial. And you go even further, there's engagement companies like yourself, DYPB, having partners where they can deliver on remote workforce training. I mean, ultimately, if your employees believe that their brand is part of your brand and it's a mutual goal, I mean, you look at Apple, it's the platinum test for having a workforce who believe in the company's objective. They form part of the brand. Starbucks, another great example. And that's what a lot of companies say we want to be. So now is an opportunity for you to take that step and to look at what they're doing to drive that engagement. I mean, a retail business is going to be very hard to communicate with. But it's definitely a great conversation, and one that is definitely something that you should start having that conversation today, and you'll be ready for tomorrow when the next wave of news comes out.
Yeah, and on that point, I mean, DYPD, is big on employee engagement and using personal branding to help people with employee engagement and productivity. So we're finding a big shift here in helping organizations deal with this, and it's something that's a new thing because it's a new world, which is why, again, we're doing these live streams, why we're doing, we're transitioning to more online type stuff. We're doing webinars and summits coming up in the next couple of weeks and months to try to deal with this, which I think is really important. Let's move on to a topic, and again, there's a lot of people out here who are sharing some great stuff here, which I appreciate. So if you have more questions, by all means, ask questions. Actually, there's a question by Daryl who says, there will be business that will tank and those that will sail through these times. What should companies learn to have a better general strategy for unprecedented situations?
I think in this one, what most people can argue is the ability to have business continuity. Before,
Yeah.
business continuity was kind of a almost a gold standard of being those top tier companies. And many companies put it aside because it was a reality that they didn't need to be faced with. But now, I think it's the argument is every company should really have some form of business continuity plan, because otherwise you won't be able to weather a storm like this again. I would argue, because if it's happened once and nothing changes, then what will your employees come back? I would bring up, but it's a great question, and one that I think if you ask 20 people, you get 20 different opinions.
Sure.
Mine nonetheless. But I do think it's most important that you say now we need to know what we can do, what jobs can go remote, and really revisit how you're doing it now. Is it a good time to just move to a more remote workforce and find partners who can help you drive engagement in that type of a format? I mean, there's behavioral analytic firms that can help do analytics in the background of systems to see your engaged population. There's companies like yourself that are great to drive that brand value, that productivity and engagement amongst your employees. And then there's partners you can have that can provide you platforms to fill in those gaps. But it's really start having that conversation now, and really finding the weak holes or the gaps in what happened to you today, so that way you can fill them for the future.
Awesome, I appreciate that. And so again, if people are joining in, we're talking about the business survival checklist, dealing with COVID crisis. What are businesses and employers doing to try to help navigate this for themselves as well as for their employees? Let's move on to a topic around engagement and productivity. So what strategies can be leveraged to drive employee and customer engagement, productivity, and maintain a high return on engagement?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the question from the chat kind of touched on that a bit.
Sure, but, absolutely. But good to repeat people so people know exactly how we're.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. But like, I think it is that time where, today's the day that you should probably go on LinkedIn, and if you don't have a company page, it would be a fairly low-hanging, low-cost solution to start a LinkedIn page.
Totally.
Ask your employees to join that group, and you have one mechanism to communicate. I mean,
and reach out to me, because I can teach you how to create a fantastic company page. I have 20,000 followers on my company page. We have DYPB with personal branding, and a lot of people are spending time developing personal branding and developing online platforms. They're investing in this. Let me or let my company help you do that. So, and there you go, shameless self-promotion. But there you go.
No such thing.
But continue.
You have to do that in COVID-19. It's the only way through it right now.
Yeah.
But seriously, like that's the type of thing. Like, are there things that are kind of table stakes that you're not doing, or really what is the most impactful for you right now? Like every time we talk to a client, we do a needs analysis. It's a great way of understanding your current state, your idealized future state. I mean, a lot of companies don't even understand like what is the purpose of bringing benefits into your compensation package, and those are the conversations that you really should start having. I mean, if your business is at risk of becoming insolvent or closing, then the conversation is really look at the framework of your business. And if the business framework isn't something that can withstand it, then what can be done to that framework that can set you up for success in the future? And then when it comes to your employees and returning them, communication. The better you are, the more frequent you are, the more comfortable your workforce is with that communication is ever so more important, because they will value that relationship if they're even not at the workforce, because you're giving them those updates. You're giving them what they need. I mean, we started the call with the 5 stages of grief. Everyone's going through it right now, and you can help them through it much quicker and benefit infinitely from an employer standpoint. And that employee will stay with you for longer, because that relationship extends beyond pay, benefits, and pension.
Yeah. So we are now pretty much near the end of our time here. But again, if you are watching the broadcast, the replay will be available to you. It's going to be there on my profile. You can check it out. If you have further questions for Adam or myself, you can ask us to ask the comments below. You can tag us, and I'm sure we'll be able to get to them, no problem. Adam, thanks so much for your time. Is there anything else you want to kind of address around the business survival checklist during COVID-19?
Not anything else that I haven't addressed. Just a good reminder to people to really take inventory of your current relationships. Look at what they're getting you and how they're setting you up for success. And if they're not delivering on your needs, I would strongly suggest finding those partners that do, because it's ever more important now than ever. And anyone with any questions, I'm an open door policy, so feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, email, any way you want, and I'm more than happy to help out. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate that. Thanks so much, Adam. And where can people reach out to you? Like, what's a good way to connect with you?
You can reach out to me through my email. It's adam.greig, Greig, at peoplecorporation.com, or you can just reach out to me on LinkedIn, send me an invite. I'll accept. I'm more than happy to partner. I mean, it's great to know people, and more often than not, it's a small world after all, but any way you can, those are the best ways, and I'm here to help.
And on that note, the LinkedIn lives that I'm doing, I'm slowly just to get to let people know, I'm going to be slowly switching to a different time period during this COVID crisis. I find the mornings with my kids and homeschooling, it's a little bit crazy. So I think I'm going to probably move it towards a lunchtime routine just as an FYI. So I'm probably going to move to 11:45 a.m. just as an FYI to people. And I'm still booking people to do interviews. If you have people you want to know, let me know. Tag them in the post, and you can certainly send me influencers, thought leaders around specific topics. I'd love to hear from you, and I'm happy to have those conversations. In the meantime, everyone, stay safe, stay out, keep asking questions, stay at home, and let's get through this together. And also, I'm doing webinars now, so I'll be doing a webinar on LinkedIn and a webinar on personal branding, and we'll be doing some online summits to replace the LinkedIn locals we're doing. So keep posted on the DYPB page. And thanks so much, Dave, for your time. Thanks so much, Adam, for your time. Really appreciate it. That's looking at David King says, "Well done, guys," and Shepard says, "Good job, Dave." Well, there you go. I'm feeling really good about that. So, good job today. So long, and we'll see you guys soon.
Keep those hands clean.